Charleston had always been a city of secrets, markets behind markets, deals behind doors, and whispers that could buy or kill a man just as quick as gold. But even in a port city shaped by greed and shadow, there had never been a night like the one when she arrived. No name, no history, no papers, only a velvet hood, a chain made of something that wasn't quite iron, and an auctioneer who wouldn't meet anyone's eyes when he spoke of her. Men who bought women by the dozens fought over her with the desperation of addicts. Merchants known for bargaining down to the last penny lost fortunes trying to claim her. Even the city's cruelest masters, people who felt nothing, stared the moment she stepped onto the hidden market's platform, spellbound and uneasy, because something was wrong with her, or right with her, or simply not human. Rumors bloomed instantly. Some said she was cursed. Some said she could heal with a single touch. Some swore her face wasn't the same each time they looked at her. But the most whispered, most terrifying rumor was the one no one dared say too loudly. She ain't a slave at all. She's the one who came to choose them. The hidden market opened only after midnight, when Charleston streets were quiet except for the distant clatter of drunken carriage wheels and the scrape of crates unloaded at the port. By day, this alley sold fish and rope. By night, the wooden stalls folded back, revealing stairways and trapdoors leading underground into a world where no law existed, not even the laws men lied about believing in. The lamps were dimmed low, the flames trembling like they, too, feared the buyers gathering within the hidden chamber. Wine sloshed, coins clinked, the smell of sweat and rum mixed with perfume and something darker anticipation. Then the room changed. The auctioneer entered, not with his usual swagger, but with stiff shoulders and shaking hands. Behind him walked two guards, who looked like they had been dragged from the grave, eyes hollow, skin pale, jaws clenched too tight. And between them, her. She wore a long velvet hood that hid her face entirely. The fabric didn't look like anything spun in Charleston or anywhere nearby. It shimmered faintly, like moonlight trapped in cloth. People leaned forward. A few stood. One man dropped his pipe. The auctioneer swallowed hard, his throat bobbing. "Gentlemen," he croaked, "tonight's final parcel is unique." One of the guards jerked backward suddenly, releasing a panicked gasp, as if something under the hood had just whispered into his ear. The crowd murmured. The price boards were cleared. Nobody needed them. "This one ain't listed," the auctioneer continued. "No records, no origin given." "No origin?" a planter scoffed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," the auctioneer said shakily, "that she was found, not delivered." The room stilled. "Found where? Found how? Found by whom?" No answers came. The auctioneer gestured toward the hooded woman, though he wouldn't step too close. "We ain't sure of her age," he lied. The tremor in his voice betrayed him he knew, but wouldn't say. "Ain't sure of her language. Ain't sure of her temperament." The guard on her right flinched violently, as if something invisible had grazed his arm. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Someone whispered, "What's wrong with her?" Someone else whispered, "What's right with her?" Then a wealthy shipping captain, famous for buying women and selling them at triple price farther south, stepped forward arrogantly. "Hood off," he demanded. "Let's see what we're buying." The crowd roared its agreement, but the auctioneer shook his head so fast his face reddened. "No," he said sharply. "Under no circumstances is the hood to be removed." That only made the room hungrier. "Why not?" someone barked. The auctioneer licked his lips. Sweat rolled down his temples. "She's different." "Different how?" He whispered a single sentence, barely loud enough for the front row to hear. "She changed each time we looked upon her." The crowd stiffened. "What do you mean changed? What kind of trick is this? You think we fools?" The shipping captain stepped closer to the hooded woman, touching the velvet fabric. "Fine," he sneered. "If you won't remove it, I will." His hand reached upward. The auctioneer screamed. "Don't!" The lamps flickered violently. The guard on her left collapsed. A sound came from beneath the hood, too quiet to be breath, too soft to be words, yet enough to freeze every man in the chamber. The captain jerked backward as if struck by lightning. A blistering welt instantly bloomed across his palm, exactly in the shape of a handprint, but darker, almost burned into the flesh. He stumbled, shouting curses, clutching his injured hand. The woman beneath the hood did not move. The crowd stared, horrified and mesmerized. The auctioneer's voice trembled as he forced the bidding to begin. "Start your offers." And every man in the room suddenly wanted her more, because nothing was more valuable than power. Nothing more intoxicating than danger. Nothing more irresistible than a mystery that could ruin them. But none of them knew the truth. She wasn't there to be bought. She wasn't there to be owned. She was there to choose the first man who would disappear. The bidding should have been a frenzy, shouting, cursing, fists slamming on the table, but instead the room fell into a strange, unnatural hush. The hooded woman stood motionless, hands folded loosely before her. Yet every man felt as though invisible fingers traced their throats. The shipping captain, still clutching his blistered hand, pushed himself upright. His pride was louder than his pain. 1,000, he spat. His voice cracked through the silence like a whip. Within seconds, 1,500, 2,000, 3. The auctioneer didn't even pretend to control the room. His voice shook as he tried to keep count, but the numbers escalated so fast they slipped away from him like minnows in a river. The woman never moved, not an inch, not even to breathe, and that, more than anything, frightened them. By the time the bidding reached 10,000, the lamps were dimming again, their flames shrinking as if oxygen was leaking out of the room. Then it happened. The hooded woman turned her head, just slightly, just enough to face the shipping captain. Her movement was slow, deliberate, as if she were acknowledging a command none of them had heard. The captain went still. Everyone did, because even though no one could see her face beneath the hood, the entire room felt the shift in the air. It wasn't attraction, or fear, or curiosity. It was recognition, as if she already knew him. He grinned, trying to disguise the tremble in his jaw. "She chooses me," he boasted. "Look at that. The creature knows who has the gold." The auctioneer swallowed. "Sir, I wouldn't take this lightly. She'll fetch 5 times what I pay," the captain interrupted. "Hell, I'll parade her on the docks myself." He stepped closer, confidence dripping from him like oil. But the auctioneer wasn't looking at the captain anymore. He was looking at the woman. Because while the captain grinned like he'd already won, the auctioneer's eyes widened in horror. The woman's shadow was changing. Her body had not moved, but the shadow she cast was twisting, lengthening, stretching behind her like something with too many limbs and not enough bones. The auctioneer stumbled backward. "Captain," he rasped. "Step away." But greed made the man deaf. He raised his blistered hand boldly. "I'll take her for 12,000. Before he finished speaking, the hooded woman lifted her head a fraction more. Just a fraction, and the captain collapsed. Not violently, not dramatically. He simply dropped like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The crowd gasped, but no one ran, because no one knew what they had just witnessed. The captain's eyes were open. His mouth was open. His chest did not rise. The guard knelt beside him, placed 2 fingers on his neck, shook his head once. Dead. But that wasn't the strangest part. The blistered handprint had vanished from his palm. A new mark had replaced it, glowing faintly in the lamplight. It was a symbol, curved, unfamiliar, almost beautiful. And no 2 men in the room agreed on what it looked like. One saw a serpent. Another swore it was a crescent moon. Another claimed it resembled an eye. But there was one thing they all agreed on. It wasn't from this world. The auctioneer stepped forward on shaky legs, pointing at the woman without daring to touch her. "She chose him," he whispered, "and now he's gone." The wealthy buyers stared, torn between terror and fascination. "You still intend to sell her?" someone asked. The auctioneer hesitated. His lips parted. His voice broke. "I don't think she's mine to sell." The hooded woman lowered her head again, returning to the perfect stillness she had begun with. But this time, the men watching her did not see a beautiful mystery. They saw a weapon, a curse, a judge, and every single one of them wondered too late. Who would she choose next? The captain's body had barely been removed before the next presence in the room made itself known. It wasn't loud. It wasn't forceful. It wasn't anything that should have stood out. But the air tightened. Every head turned toward the man standing near the back wall, a tall, lean figure dressed in gray wool, the handle of a silver-tipped cane glinting beneath the lamplight. He hadn't bid yet. He hadn't spoken. He'd watched the entire spectacle with a strange, analytical calm. Unlike the others who stared at the hooded woman with hunger, fear, or greed, his gaze was different. He looked at her the way a physician might study a fever, or the way a prison warden studies an unlocked cell. Measured, careful, unimpressed. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Sir Mr. Harrow, perhaps you should leave before—" "No," the man interrupted softly. His voice was gentle enough to lull a child, but it carried weight that seemed to press on the room itself. "I will stay." The auctioneer froze. Everyone in Louisiana knew the name Silas Harrow. Industrialist, land baron, owner of half the sugar mills along the Mississippi. A man whispered about far more often than addressed directly. He tapped his cane once against the floor, and the sound echoed as though the room were hollow. "I will bid," he said. A ripple of panic ran through the gathered buyers. "You saw what she did," hissed the cotton broker beside him. "Are you mad?" Harrow's eyes didn't leave the woman. "She didn't do anything," he said calmly. "The man simply died. He died when she looked at him." "Perhaps." Harrow smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "That only means she is interesting." The hooded woman shifted just barely, and for the first time since the captain's death, she turned her head toward someone else. Harrow. But unlike before, nothing flickered. The lamps stayed steady. No shadows crawled. No breath caught in anyone's throat. If anything, the room became colder, sharper. Harrow inclined his head in return, like two players acknowledging the first move in a game. He spoke clearly. 20,000. The auction house erupted. "That's madness. She'll kill you next. Call off the bidding." The auctioneer threw up his hands. "Gentlemen, please, this is no longer a matter of coin. 50,000. Silas Harrow didn't raise his voice. He didn't blink. He simply slid the number into the air like a knife. The men fell silent. $50,000. It was the price of a full estate. A riverboat. A lifetime of labor from 50 ordinary enslaved workers. But Harrow didn't look like a man spending money. He looked like a man placing a bet. The hooded woman slowly lifted her face toward him again. Nothing moved beneath the fabric, but somehow the sense of attention was unmistakable, like a blade turning toward its target. Harrow accepted her gaze without flinching. "I believe she understands me," he murmured. A planter to his left barked out a nervous laugh. "Understands what?" The silver cane tapped once more. "That she cannot frighten me." At that, the hooded woman tilted her head slightly. Not in threat, not in interest, almost in amusement. The gesture was so subtle most men would have missed it, but Harrow noticed. And whatever he saw in that tiny movement deepened the curious glint in his eyes. "Sold," the auctioneer whispered, as if saying it louder might bring another death. But the moment the gavel touched wood, something impossible happened. The hooded woman took a single step forward, her first movement of the entire night, and every lamp in the building dimmed, then steadied almost respectfully, as though acknowledging her choice. The crowd stumbled back, terrified, but she did not approach them. She walked straight toward Silas Harrow. Her footsteps were soundless, her presence enormous, and when she reached him, she stopped an arm's length away. Harrow gripped his cane a little tighter, but he did not step back. "Why me?" he asked under his breath. The woman lifted her hood a fraction, not enough to reveal her face, just enough for him and only him to see the faintest curve of her mouth, a smile, small, silent, undeniably deliberate. Harrow inhaled sharply. For the first time, the calm faltered, just a hair, because that smile was not seductive or mysterious. It was knowing, as though she recognized him too, as though she'd been waiting. Then her shadow stretched long, thin, and impossibly dark, curling behind her like ink spilled across the plank floor. And for the first time that night, Silas Harrow looked afraid. Silas Harrow had been feared from Tennessee to the Gulf. Yet as the hooded woman stood before him, silent, steady, smiling that small, unsettling smile, his grip tightened on his silver cane until his knuckles blanched. He couldn't explain why. He couldn't name the fear, but he felt it. A sensation like icy fingers brushing the inside of his rib cage, searching for a place to settle. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Mr. Harrow, shall I have her chained for transport?" "No," Harrow said too quickly. Several men stared at him, aghast. "She killed Captain Rhodes," someone whispered. She looked at him and stopped his heart. "She did nothing." Harrow replied sharply, though his eyes weren't leaving her. And chains will only offend her. Offend her, not restrain her. Offend. Even he heard the strange choice of word, but he didn't take it back. The hooded woman tilted her head at the phrase, that same nearly invisible amusement flickering across the fabric that hid her face. Harrow swallowed hard. He didn't like feeling unreadable ground under his feet. He preferred numbers, schedules, controlled systems where every gear fit. This woman was none of those things. Come, he forced himself to say. Walk with me. She didn't move at first. Instead, she leaned slightly closer, not enough to be threatening, but enough that the faintest whisper escaped her lips, a whisper only he heard. Silas. Harrow's breath caught, not because she said his name, because of how she said it, gently, familiarly, as if she had spoken it many times before. He stepped back despite himself. Who told you my name? She didn't answer. The auction house doors opened, letting in a gust of cold night air. She walked past him, unchained, unhurried as if she had chosen him, not the other way around. The men inside held their breath until she vanished through the doorframe. Only then did the whispers erupt. She spoke. What did she say? Why didn't she kill him too? But Silas Harrow couldn't answer any of them. His pulse hammered in his throat as he followed her into the night. The moon hung low and silver as Harrow and the hooded woman sat across from each other in his private carriage. She positioned herself in the darkest corner, her face still cloaked, her posture unnervingly patient. Silas tapped his cane rhythmically against the floorboards, an old habit, a way to measure time, calm nerves. Tap, tap, tap. You understand English, he said finally. Good. That will make things simpler. She didn't respond. His jaw clenched. I purchased you for $50,000. I need to know what you are capable of, what you know, where you came from. Speak. She inhaled, slow and deliberate. My name, she whispered, is Noel. He leaned forward. Noel, what? She didn't elaborate. He felt something itch at the back of his skull, a pressure, a nudge, a sensation he could neither shake nor name. Do you know me? Harrow asked quietly. Noel's hood shifted downward as if she were studying him. Her voice was soft, but absolute. I know what you hide. A pulse of heat shot through Silas's chest. Hide? He had secrets. Yes, serious ones. But no one alive knew all of them. What, exactly, do you think I hide? He asked with a cold smile. Noel raised her hand and tapped lightly on the carriage window. Once, twice, a rhythmic pattern. Silas froze. It was the exact rhythm he tapped with his cane, the exact rhythm he'd tapped since childhood, since a traumatic night he never spoke of, since something had crawled into his nightmares and stayed. You mimic me, he said, voice tight. I remember you, Noel murmured. He stared at her. Remember? From where? Lightning split the sky without thunder, illuminating the trees in harsh white strokes. For a heartbeat, her shadow stretched unnaturally across the carriage floor longer than it should have been, bending in the wrong direction. Silas blinked, and it snapped back. Tell me what you want, he demanded. Noel's hood turned toward the window. Someone is following us. He stiffened. Who? Her voice lowered, weighted with certainty. The man who believes he owns me. Silas's hand slid cautiously toward the pistol hidden beneath his coat. Who is he? Noel didn't look at him. But when she answered, her words chilled him more than the storm outside. He calls himself your brother. Silas froze. The carriage wheels creaked. The horses exhaled clouds of steam. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. I, Silas said carefully, do not have a brother. Noel finally turned her hood fully toward him. Yes, she whispered. You do. And for the first time, Silas Harrow felt the past clawing its way back toward him, dragging secrets he had buried so deep he believed they were dead. Noel wasn't here by chance. She was here because of him, because of something he had forgotten, or something he had forced himself not to remember. The carriage had barely stopped when Silas Harrow stepped out onto the muddy road, boots sinking into the wet earth. The storm had cleared minutes before, leaving the forest steeped in the smell of drenched pine and the cold sting of night air. Noel remained seated inside, her hood turned toward the tree line. Silas followed her gaze. The trees were still, too still. Where is he? Silas muttered, gripping the handle of his concealed pistol. "He's close," Noel whispered. Her voice had changed, softer, almost mournful, as though she dreaded what was coming. Silas scanned the shadows. "If someone's following us, I assure you I'll—" The sound sliced through his words, a twig snapping clean. Not the wind, not an animal. Someone stepping deliberately. Silas's heart hammered as he peered into the darkness between the trunks. The horses whinnied nervously, their hooves scraping against the wet ground. Another snap, then another. Footsteps circling them. Noel's hood tilted ever so slightly, tracking movement Silas couldn't see. "You're not telling me everything," he whispered. "I am telling you exactly what you need to know," Noel replied calmly. "He's been waiting for you." Silas swallowed, throat painfully dry. "Waiting for me? Why?" "Because," she murmured, "he thinks you destroyed his life." Silas barked a bitter laugh. "I've destroyed many lives. He'll have to be more specific." Noel didn't look amused, or angry, or frightened. Her stillness was unnerving, like a statue molded from shadow. "You were children when the fire came," she said quietly. Silas stiffened. No, this was impossible. No one knew about the fire. His left hand twitched, his scarred fingers aching with memory. The fire, the screaming, the silhouette in the doorway. "That was decades ago," he said, trying and failing to keep his voice steady. "Nothing survived that night." "Something did," Noel whispered. "Someone." The forest exhaled, and then Silas saw it. A figure standing between the trees. Tall, broad-shouldered, damp clothes clinging to him, face hidden by shadow. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply stood there, watching. "Call out," Noel said softly. Silas raised the pistol, aiming it at the figure. "Show yourself." The man didn't flinch. Silas's voice deepened, anger covering fear. "I said show your—" Lightning flashed again, bathing the world in white. For one instantaneous heartbeat, Silas saw the man's face, saw the familiar jawline, saw the eyes dark, hollow, smoldering with something that made his blood chill. Then darkness swallowed the features again. Silas stumbled back. That's not possible." Noel's voice was barely audible. "You know his name." Silas felt like he couldn't breathe. "Henry," he whispered. The name tasted like smoke in his mouth. Henry Harrow, his older brother, the boy who vanished in the fire and was declared dead. But Silas had never believed in ghosts. Not until now. The figure finally moved, one slow step forward. Silas cocked the pistol. "Stay back." Noel didn't move. "He won't hurt you." "Not yet." Silas shot her a furious glare. "Then what the hell does he want?" "To know," she whispered. "Why you left him to burn." Silas's heartbeat thundered. "That's a lie," he snapped. "I didn't leave him. I searched for him. I went back into the house." The figure stepped into faint moonlight. This time, Silas saw burned skin trailing down the left side of Henry's face, disappearing beneath his collar. He saw the scorched, twisted ear, the angry red memory of his survival. And the hatred. Oh, the hatred. "My God," Silas breathed. The forest held its breath. Henry lifted a hand, pointing one accusing finger at his brother. Silas flinched as if struck. "He thinks you lit the fire," Noel said. Silas's stomach dropped. "That's Noel. That's madness. Why would he believe that?" "Because he remembers," Noel murmured. "But memory is a creature that grows teeth over time." Henry advanced again, slow and steady. Silas raised the pistol higher. "Don't test me." Noel remained eerily calm. "He's not afraid of bullets." Silas's voice cracked. "Everyone is afraid of bullets." "No," she said softly. "Only the living are." Silas turned to her sharply. "What is that supposed to—" Henry lunged. Silas fired. The shot echoed through the trees, a white-hot burst of violence. But Henry didn't fall. He didn't even hesitate. He kept walking, unblinking, unstoppable until he stood barely a yard from Silas. Silas staggered back, horrified. No, that's not. You're not." Henry raised his hand again and placed it gently against Silas's cheek. Cold, ice cold. Silas felt his legs weakening, dizziness clouding his vision. His brother's voice raspy, broken, finally cut through the night. "Why did you leave me?" Silas nearly collapsed. Noel stepped out of the carriage at last, and she spoke the words that shattered what little courage Silas had left. "You should answer him, Silas. He's been waiting 30 years. The morning after the raid on the river cabin, Charleston buzzed with rumors once again. In the taverns that sailors haunted, in the parlors of the wealthy where women whispered behind feathered fans, in the back rooms of slave dealers where men counted coins with blood-stained fingers, one name circled like a restless ghost: Amara, the woman who had vanished, the woman they had failed to catch, the woman who had cursed Charleston's hidden market by surviving it. And now, she was out there somewhere alive, angry, and unbroken. For 2 days, she and Josiah moved through the marshlands like shadows. They stayed off the roads, hiding in reeds and drinking river water cupped into their palms. Every rustle of grass sent Josiah's hand toward the stolen knife tucked in his belt. Every snap of a twig made Amara's breath tighten, but her steps never faltered. "We ain't safe yet," Josiah whispered as they climbed the bank of a dried creek. "We will be," Amara said simply. There was no fear in her tone, none of the trembling he expected from someone who had survived the things she had. He watched her walk ahead, tall despite exhaustion, her back straight, her chin lifted. Something indescribable clung to her, something he could only call strength. Not loud strength, not the kind that needed to show itself. A quiet strength that threatened every man who had ever tried to own her. On the third night, a storm rolled across the marsh. Lightning cracked open the sky, and the wind tore through the reeds like a warning. They found shelter beneath a fallen tree trunk, crouching inside its hollow center while rain hammered the world outside. "Why'd they want you so badly?" Josiah finally asked over the roar of thunder. Amara didn't answer at first. She ran her fingers through the mud-wet bark, lost in thought. "Because I remind them of something they can never keep," she murmured. "What's that?" "Power," Josiah frowned. "You were just a slave?" She finished for him, her voice sharpening. "That's what they saw. But it ain't what I am." He swallowed, embarrassed. "I didn't mean—" "I know," she said softly. "But you need to understand how those men think. They didn't fear me because of beauty. Not really. Beauty they can buy, use, and throw away." Lightning flashed across her face, illuminating the intensity in her eyes. "They feared me because I look at them like I see right through their souls. Because I never bowed my head, not once. Because when they tried to take everything from me," her fist closed slowly, "I kept something they couldn't reach." "And what's that?" he whispered. Amara's expression softened into something almost sad. "Myself?" The storm raged on, but inside that rotted log, a new understanding settled between them. By morning, the rain had calmed, and a heavy mist cloaked the marsh. They continued north, following the faint directions given by the river woman who'd helped them escape. But danger was tightening around them. At midday, they heard voices approaching 2 men on horseback, their boots splashing through shallow water. Amara and Josiah ducked into the reeds, hearts pounding. "You heard 'bout that Amara woman?" one rider said. "Every trader in Charleston wants her," the other replied. "Ain't natural for one slave to cause this much trouble. They're sending dogs tonight, tracking parties tomorrow." The men paused. One spat into the mud. "Boss says she ain't human. Says the way she looks at him gives him nightmares." "It's a mostadum." The horses trotted off, leaving their laughter behind them. Josiah turned to Amara. "What did you do to that man?" She didn't smile, but there was a glint in her eyes. "I made him see what he is." They pressed on. By evening, they reached a small abandoned rice mill, half-collapsed walls, shattered roof, but shelter enough for the night. Josiah gathered dry straw while Amara checked the perimeter for tracks. But while she was crouched near the mill's foundation, running her hand across a muddy footprint, she froze. Josiah saw her expression shift. "What is it?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood. Slowly. Her body rigid, her jaw tight. "They're already here," she whispered. Before he could speak, the distant sound of a horn echoed across the marsh, low, deep, unmistakable. A slave hunter's horn. Josiah's breath hitched. "We can run." "No," Amara said firmly. "If we run now, they'll chase us till dawn. We need a place to vanish." She scanned the mill quickly, her eyes sharp, calculating. Then she saw at a section of the foundation where a large stone had collapsed inward, revealing a crawl space just wide enough for 2 bodies. "Here," she ordered. They slid inside, forcing their bodies into the darkness. Mud soaked their clothes. The space was cold, narrow, suffocating but hidden. Just as they settled, lantern lights flickered across the marsh outside. Dogs barked. Men shouted, "Fan out, she's close." Josiah trembled. But beside him, Amara was still. Utterly still. Not even a heartbeat seemed to move her. And in that moment, he understood something. It wasn't beauty that made her the most desired woman ever sold. It wasn't mystery or rumor. It was this, the terrifying calm of someone who refused to break. Even when the world was hunting her, the dogs found the mill within minutes. Their snarling echoed across the marsh as they tore through reeds and splashed into shallow pools. Lantern beams crisscrossed the darkness, their glow sliding over the collapsing walls like restless ghosts. Inside the narrow crawl space, Josiah pressed his back to cold stone, barely breathing. Mud clung to his skin, and every heartbeat felt like it shook the earth. But Amara was still so still that she seemed carved from the shadows themselves. Outside, boots thudded against rotted boards. "She's close," a man growled. Dogs got the scent. A lantern passed so near the hiding space that its heat could almost be felt. Josiah flinched. Amara didn't. Her eyes were half-lidded, watching the crack of light with a calm he couldn't understand. She looked like someone who'd hidden in far worse places, from far worse men, and survived. The dogs sniffed wildly around the mill, scratching at broken stones. Their growls deepened, and Josiah felt panic rise in his throat. "They're gonna find us," he whispered, barely audible. Amara's hand closed around his wrist, not harshly, but steady, grounding. "No," she murmured. "Not tonight. How do you know?" Her gaze didn't shift from the narrow slit of moonlight. "Because fear blinds them," she said softly. "They think they're hunting a runaway. They're hunting something they don't understand." Josiah swallowed, unsure what she meant, but somehow believing her anyway. "Spread out," a voice barked. "Check the mill first." Several men climbed through the collapsed doorway. Their boots crunched against wet straw. One kicked aside a beam. Another stabbed his rifle bayonet into the shadows. Josiah stopped breathing entirely. A dog trotted toward the foundation, their foundation. Its nose pressed to the ground. It growled, low and sure. It pawed at the earth, whined, and lowered its snout again. Josiah's vision blurred, but Amara leaned forward, closed her eyes, and whispered something so faint he couldn't hear the words, only the rhythm. The dog froze. Its ears twitched. Its whine turned into a confused huff. Then it backed away, tail lowered, as if retreating from something it refused to challenge. A hunter shouted, "What's wrong with that mutt?" The dog barked once at the foundation. Not a warning, but a refusal. Then it trotted off in the opposite direction. "What the? Useless hound!" Search the marsh. Lanterns moved away. Boots thudded farther and farther. The danger dissolved like a fading storm. Josiah stared at Amara. What did you do?" She finally turned to him. Animals understand things men don't. They sense the spirit beneath the skin. Her voice was quiet but steady. "I asked it to leave." He gaped at her. "You asked?" Shh. Voices drifted away into the night. Only when the last lantern was a dim glow in the distance did Amara crawl out from the hiding space. Josiah followed, shaking with relief. The marsh smelled of wet grass and gunpowder, but the hunters were gone. Amara brushed dirt off her arms. She looked exhausted, but her spine was straight, her steps steady. Josiah couldn't help staring. "You're not like anyone I've ever met," he said finally. Amara didn't smile. "Because you never met anyone who refused to let the world shape them." They traveled until the moon climbed high overhead, navigating by stars and memory. The marsh slowly gave way to thicker forest. Cicadas buzzed. The air grew cooler. Around midnight, they reached a hilltop overlooking the wide bend of a river. The water glittered under the moonlight like a silver path. Josiah exhaled. North stars clear tonight. But Amara wasn't looking at the sky. She was staring at the river, at a small boat tied on the bank. Two men slept beside it, rifles leaning against a stump, Lantern dimmed. Josiah whispered, "We should go around." "No," Amara said. "We need that boat. It's too risky. It's necessary." He hesitated. "You really think we can take it without killing them?" Amara's eyes turned cold and calm. "We won't need to kill anyone." There was something chilling in how she said it, not cruelty, not violence, just certainty. They crept down the hill in silence, moving like shadows through bushes and undergrowth. The men slept heavily, their snores louder than the river. One had boots kicked off, the other's hat covering his face. Amara crouched beside the closest man. Josiah held his breath, but she didn't touch him. She didn't steal his weapon. She simply leaned close, studying his face as if reading something beneath the skin. Then she whispered, barely audible, "Wake afraid." The man jolted violently, gasping for breath as if trapped inside some nightmare. His eyes shot open in terror, unfocused, panicked. He scrambled backward, tripping over his partner and shouting, "Get away! Get away!" The second man woke with a curse, stumbling to his feet. "What's wrong with you?" Something was here. "There's nothing." The terrified man didn't listen. He grabbed the lantern and ran, crashing blindly into the woods. His partner chased after him, yelling. Within seconds, the riverbank was empty. Josiah stared at Amara, stunned. "What did you do to him?" She stepped into the boat. Nothing more than what he already feared. They pushed the boat off the shore and into the gentle current. The moonlit river carried them forward, quiet and steady. Josiah paddled. Amara sat at the bow, watching the forest slip by. After a long silence, he said, "Amara, why do they fear you so much?" "This time," she answered without hesitation, "because they know I don't belong to them. And they know one day, others will learn they don't belong to them either." Her gaze hardened, fierce and unbreakable. "And fear is all they have left." The river carried them into the dark. Two fugitives, one prophecy, and a truth powerful enough to unsettle an entire city. By dawn, the river widened into a pale horizon, the first glow of morning brushing the water in shades of gold. Mist hung low, swirling around the small boat as though hiding it from whatever still hunted them. Josiah's arms ached from rowing, but Amara hadn't once asked to stop. She watched the water as if reading signs within the ripples, signs only she understood. "By midday," she murmured, "we'll be close to the city. Not Charleston. Not Savannah. Somewhere worse." Josiah's hands tightened around the oars. "You mean Franklin?" Amara nodded once. Franklin, where slave catchers gathered like wolves, where escaped souls were dragged back with chains and whips, where the market owners believed themselves untouchable, where Amara was born, where her name first inspired whispers, where they feared her long before she ever escaped. The river bent sharply, narrowing between steep clay banks. Trees hunched over the water like eavesdropping giants. The current slowed, as if warning them. Josiah lowered his voice. "We should dock before the patrol boats come. We won't hide on land," Amara said. "They'll search the woods." He frowned. "Then what do we do?" She lifted her chin toward the far bank. A fog-shrouded structure emerged, a pier, long abandoned, half collapsed, with a rusted hoist hanging like a broken skeletal arm. "This is where they first tried to sell me," she said. Josiah blinked. "Sell you? Here? But this place looks like rotten wood and old ghosts," she finished. "Yes. They auctioned children here before the markets expanded." A chill ran through him. Amara stood, steady despite the rocking water. "We go there. Why? Because that's where they'll least expect me." They docked silently, stepping onto planks so old they groaned under the weight. Nets lay scattered, fossilized with dry algae. A bird skeleton rested in a corner, undisturbed. Josiah shivered. "This place feels cursed." "It is," Amara said. Then she added, almost gently, "But a curse can be turned." She knelt, pressing her palm against the darkened wood as if listening for something buried deep beneath. Josiah watched, unsure. Then she rose and faced the trees. "They're coming." Boots thundered before the voices. "Spread out. Boats fresh. They couldn't have gotten far." "She's close, I can feel it." "How many? 6? 9? Josiah backed toward the pier's edge, panic rising. "Amara, we should hide, jump, run." "No," she said calmly. This ends today. He stared at her. Ends? What ends? Amara stepped forward, the morning light striking her face, revealing something fierce and resolute. My fear, she said. Their myth. My name. The hunters burst from the trees. There she is. Don't move. Drop your hands. Guns pointed. Lanterns flared. The men fanned out, encircling her like predators ready to feast. Josiah stepped between them and Amara instinctively, but she gently pulled him aside. No, let them see. A captain stepped forward, scarred and smirking. Thought you could run, girl? Amara didn't blink. I didn't run, she said. I'm returning. He barked a laugh. Returning? To what? Her stare was steady, unsettling. To remind you why you fear me. The men exchanged uneasy glances. The captain spat. You're nothing but a skinny witch made of bones and lies. Yes, Amara said softly. But you know what they say about bones? She took one step forward. They remember. The air shifted. The men froze, not physically, but in spirit, like prey sensing a storm. Amara lowered her voice into that strange, rhythmic cadence Josiah had heard before, half breath, half hymn, half memory of something older than the land beneath them. And every man felt it. Something unseen but real. Something that crawled beneath their skin. Something that knew their sins. One man dropped his gun. Another stumbled back. A third clutched his chest as if a phantom hand squeezed it. The captain tried to shout, but only managed a strangled noise. You came hunting me, Amara said, but deep down you knew the truth. She raised her hand, not in threat, but in revelation. You were never the hunters. The wind rose suddenly, violently, whipping the river into froth. The pier groaned. Mist thickened, swirling like white smoke. You were always the hunted. The men broke. Some ran for the trees. Some threw themselves into the river. Some fell to their knees, begging God or screaming nonsense. Only the captain remained standing barely. What are you? He gasped. Amara stepped close enough that he felt her breath. Something you cannot chain. Her words landed like a verdict. He turned and fled, tripping over fallen nets, scrambling like a frightened animal. He did not look back. When silence finally fell, Josiah let out the breath he'd been holding for minutes. Amara, you didn't touch them. You didn't hurt them. I didn't need to. He swallowed. What did they see? Not me, she said. The truth inside themselves. It's of reparasai. The river quieted. The mist thinned. They'll never chase you again, Josiah said softly. Amara stepped to the edge of the pier, looking toward the rising sun. No, she whispered. They'll warn others. About what? She turned to him. About the one slave they could never own. And the city, the entire city, woke that morning with a new rumor on its tongue. A name no hunter dared to say loudly. A name spoken with fear and awe. Amara. His sun had climbed high over the river when Amara and Josiah finally left the pier. The water, calm now, reflected the pale blue sky, but beneath its surface lay the memory of chaos, an invisible pulse that whispered of things that had come and gone in the mist. Josiah rowed silently. He could not speak, not after what he had witnessed. Amara sat at the bow, her eyes fixed on the distant city skyline. There was no joy in her gaze, only the resolute weight of someone who had survived, conquered, and claimed the fear that had once hunted her. Do you ever tire of this? Josiah asked finally, his voice low, breaking the quiet. Amara's lips curved into a shadow of a smile. Tire of surviving? No. Tire of their fear? Her eyes flicked to him, amber bright against the sunlight. Never. Fear is power. They reached a bend where the river widened into marshland. Cattails leaned into the current as though bowing. Amara paused, resting her hands on her knees. They'll speak of me differently now. Not as a woman, not as a slave, not even as a story, but as a warning. Josiah swallowed hard. What will you do next? She shrugged, yet there was a precision to her movement, a control that made even the trembling oars feel inadequate. I could vanish again. I could settle somewhere no one would know me, or I could teach them that fear is earned, not given. He shivered, understanding the gravity of her words. There was no turning back. There was no safe path forward. Once a legend like Amara's began walking, The ground itself trembled in her wake. A sudden caw split the air, a raven landing on a twisted tree by the riverbank. Its black eyes met hers. She nodded. They watch. Josiah's heart skipped. Who? The city. The hunters. Anyone foolish enough to think power is theirs by right. They will remember me. And they will remember what comes for those who betray the living and the free. The boat drifted into a narrow channel, reeds brushing against their arms, the river hissing around the hull. Amara lifted her hand, and Josiah saw it a faint shimmer, almost invisible, like heat rising off a black stone. The air pulsed, alive, not just magic, perhaps, but memory made flesh, anger made visible. We will be ready for them, she said. They think they are hunters. They do not know how to be prey. And I know every shadow, every breath, every secret they keep. Josiah looked at her, fear and awe coiled together. He realized then that Amara's power was not in her arms, not in her mind, not in her courage. It was in the stories she carried, the stories of every wrong done to her, every injustice, every stolen life. She had transformed pain into a weapon sharper than any blade. The city rose ahead, its buildings dark against the morning light, and with it, the inevitable reckoning waited. Amara did not flinch. Let them come, she whispered, and let the rivers run red with their own mistakes before they learn who I am. Josiah clenched his hands on the oars. He had seen fear before, but never like this. Not fear that belonged to a person, that radiated outward, that could touch the bones of men long before they saw the danger. The city slept, unaware. But within its walls, whispers began to stir. They would speak of a black-haired shadow, a woman with a scar across her cheek, eyes like embers, who had walked through their nightmares and lived, who had never bent, never yielded, and had left the faintest mark of vengeance wherever she passed. Amara turned her gaze fully forward, letting the wind whip her hair into wild tangles, her chest rising and falling like a drumbeat. The world, she said softly, has never known me, but it will remember me now, and it will never be the same. The boat drifted silently into the mouth of the river, where salt water met fresh, and the horizon opened wide. Amara sat tall, waiting for the city to awaken, waiting for the inevitable stories, the whispered warnings, the trembling feet of men who thought themselves untouchable. And somewhere deep beneath the currents, the pulse of the river itself seemed to beat in time with her heartbeat, as if the land, the water, and the mist recognized one truth: Amara was free, and she would never be hunted again.